Howdy! Howdy! How is everyone doing today? Are we well? Yes. Are we wanting to learn to be more well? Maybe. Okay, so my name is Christina Bookout, and I'm the graduate assistant for Wellness Works, the Texas A&M's official employee wellness program. So welcome everyone to our first nutrition meeting or event for Wellness Works. We're going to learn how to eat well and be well, and being mindful through diet fads. So thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please see myself, Bree, or Courtney after the event, or even Megan, and let us know how you feel or have any questions. If you love this event today, please stay tuned for our wellness events in the fall. We will have a six weeks full of different nutrition events that will cover different topics such as nutrition when you're working out, for sports, for your family, through geriatrics, through the life cycle. Those are just a few to name to get us started. But if you love today, stay tuned for the fall, and please join us again in the fall. I'm going to kick it off to Megan because she's got the good stuff to say. So please help me welcome Megan Wyndham to our event today.
All right, thank you, and howdy.
Howdy.
Well, I'm excited to be here and partnering with the Wellness Works program too. I've done a few presentations to our well leaders, and they were received very well and kind of got some feedback. I've also done some presentations to just local HR entities within different departments. So that's been a fun experience for me. Let me just give you a little bit of background about myself, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. My name is Megan Wyndham. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian. Also have my master's in public health from UT School of Public Health in Houston. So I did a lot of my training in the Med Center and have a lot of experience with eating disorders, weight management, diabetics, and any type of nutrition need. I currently work in the Butyl Health Center on campus, so I see students every single day for any type of nutrition need, whether that is eating disorders or weight management or sports nutrition. So I see a lot, as you can imagine. Students have a lot of questions, and this topic in particular is one that I answer on a daily basis for students. So what are the fads? What's the latest in the media? What are we seeing? And so this is going to be a very interactive presentation. I want you to get out of it just as much as you can. So as we go throughout, if there's questions that you have, please stop me at any point. Ask those questions. Don't wait till the end until you're forgot what you were going to ask. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through different sections of food fads, trends, diets, things that you're seeing a lot of in the media, things that you're seeing a lot of in social media, TV, the internet, that type of thing. But like I said, stop me at any point, and then we'll save some time at the end for a little bit of question and answer, so we will have more time there again. Okay? All right, so before we get started, tell me why we eat what we do. So what influences our eating patterns or choices? And just shout them out. Time, mood.
What's handy?
What's handy? Convenience, yes.
Stress.
What else?
Taste,
yes. Someone else?
Spouse,
yes. I think we were just talking about that at the beginning here of influences of how we have, usually the males in the family can make anything unhealthy. They try to turn that into that. So we'll go through that here. But why we eat what we do? You all mentioned convenience, cost. There's a lot of confusion in nutrition. And nutrition is always changing, which I think why it makes it a little bit confusing, because the research changes a little bit, we find new things out. Taste and food preferences, this is probably number one for a lot of consumers and a lot of patients that I work with, is if it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to eat it. So we've got to find that taste preference. Physiological influences too, this would just be the disease states. Maybe it's caring for an elderly parent or family member with these. Your lifestyle influences, so time, culture. I see a lot of patients and students too who deal with different cultural issues, so being able to meet them where they are. And then certainly environmental, and this goes true for your family members, maybe this is coworkers. And so you can see there's a whole big gamut of why we eat what we do. And it's not just always taste, but sometimes different factors go into that. And what I want to dive into now is more of that marketing and media tips and suggestions that we're seeing and how to translate that into how to make a better choice. So here are just some diet trends in the media. A lot of this is misinformation on the internet. We see things, do we believe it, do we not? Who's writing it? Do we really know? I'll tell you, a lot of times you'll see a nutritionist or nutrition blogger, a dietitian. From my perspective here, a registered dietitian has gone to school for 4 years, has gone to an accredited internship, passed an RD exam, and then continues credits like a physician would do on a yearly basis. A nutritionist is really anyone who call themselves that. Anyone in the room could say, I'm a nutritionist. I took a class online. I took 1 credit at A&M as a nutrition major. So anyone could call themselves a nutritionist. So be careful of where you're getting that information and who's presenting that on the internet. Supplements are always out there. We'll talk about removal of entire food groups. So maybe that's carbohydrates or proteins or fats and what to look out for there. You'll see the terms fat-free, low-carb, sugar-free. How do we decipher those terms, and how do we know if it's appropriate for us versus someone else, or if we should even be choosing those? We're going to dive really deep into gluten-free, paleo, ketogenic, intermittent fasting. Those are all big topics that we're seeing a lot of right now. And then those marketing buzzwords. I do a lot of grocery store tours with students, and that's one thing that we see over and over, the front of the package and the marketing that grabs us into that says gluten-free, but do we really know what gluten-free means? The things that say sugar-free, but how do we know if it's really sugar-free or it still tastes sweet and what that could be from? So those are some questions that I hope to answer from you all today if you have those. Well, let's dive into this trend. What are some diet fads or trends that you're seeing or hearing or maybe personally doing or maybe have family members that are talking about it?
Ketones.
Ketogenic, yes. What else?
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting.
Oh, the cleansing.
Cleanses, yes. Paleo, Whole30. Anything else? All right, I think you covered most of what we're going to talk about. What did you say? Atkins, yes, low carb. So you've talked about most of them, but let's start with juicing, and then we're going to go into the cleansing. So juicing, if we look at this here, what I like to describe this as, if we consume the whole piece of fruit, that orange or apple or banana or peach, we're getting a lot of fiber in that. If we squeeze that orange out, what's left in our hand is the fiber, the peel, a lot of great nutrients. And it takes almost 2 to 3 oranges to make that glass of juice that we're consuming. So juices were one of those. It's fading a little bit, but I still have a lot of consumers doing this. It doesn't include the pulp or skin, which means we're getting a whole lot less fiber, which means also that our blood sugar goes up with that juice consumption and then spikes down. As opposed to if we have fiber and that whole piece of fruit, we're going to level out a little bit more blood sugar. Here again, it takes 3 or 4 pieces of fruit to make that 1 glass of juice. So if you just think of about that from a calorie standpoint, 2 to 3 pieces of fruit or 4 or more gives a lot of calories per that juice. So the difference in the calorie consumption. Juice is going to be more calorie dense. So if you do like juicing, or you do like the idea of that because maybe you don't like to eat a whole piece of fruit, or maybe you're just not one of those that goes and grabs a salad every day, it's just not what you like. So I would encourage you to blend rather than juice, meaning I'd rather you take that whole piece of fruit, take the skin off, or the peel, whatever the outside is, throw it in the blender, blend it with other foods or fruits or vegetables. You're going to get the fiber, you're going to get all the nutrients, and you're going to feel way more full than if you just squeezed that fruit out. So this kind of helps a little bit in adding back those nutrients if you're from the perspective of you really don't want to actually eat that piece of fruit. Okay? Questions on this, juicing? Good? Okay. Let's move on to like detoxes, cleanses. This was another one that was talked about. I had a student just last week ask about this, and he was trying to go on just more of a healthy eating pattern. And he said, well, I'm going to start this cleanse before I start my diet pattern. And that's very typical of a lot of consumers doing these. And he said, you know, but I've lost 5 pounds and I feel better. And I said, but yeah, how much are you going to the bathroom? And it was constantly all day long because a lot of these detoxes or cleanses are more or less a laxative. So it causes more frequent bowel movements. It causes more frequent urination. So yes, the scale is going to show that we lost weight quickly, but a lot of times it's more at a risk for our bodies because we're not absorbing those nutrients and we're not getting the key vitamins and minerals that we need. So your liver does a great job of detoxing every single day. It detoxes our medications that we take. It detoxes the foods that we eat. And there is no real benefit to detox or a cleanse in perspective of overall health. It's a very short-term, very short-lived weight loss episode, and it's not something that I would suggest here. It can cause issues too, as you see with dehydration, so heart issues, muscle aching, cramping, that type of thing, lethargy, all those types of things as well. If you want to eat better or have more of that detox type feeling, your antioxidants are where they're at. That's where in our fruits, our vegetables, usually our deeper, darker colored fruits and vegetables, is where we're seeing more of our antioxidants there. So if you wanted to do anything with this plan, try to do more of the antioxidant-rich foods to help with that detoxification. But overall, your liver is doing that as you're sitting here right now. Okay? Questions on that? Good. All right. Gluten-free. So when we look at gluten-free, gluten is a protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. Okay? It's always been there. It's not something new. But we're seeing a lot of this more in the media. And also celebrities touting that I went on a gluten-free diet and I lost weight. When we look at gluten-free, the reason why we have a gluten-free diet is it was developed for celiac disease. And celiac disease is an autoimmune condition that some Americans have, that they cannot process gluten and they have to strictly avoid gluten. It is a medical condition, medical necessity to avoid gluten. We're just seeing it more prominent now. It's always been around here again, but we're seeing more of it, not in celiac disease, but what we call gluten sensitivity. And so you may have heard people say, well, I'm sensitive to gluten, I have an upset stomach with that. And there is some truth behind that, but it's not always the case. A lot of times it's what we're eating that causes that sensitivity or that upset stomach with eating carbohydrates or gluten. When we notice weight loss with a gluten-free diet, usually it's because they're cutting out a lot of processed foods. So if we think of wheat, rye, and barley, those are in a lot of things that we may not even be aware of. Soy sauce has wheat in it. When we look at many of our condiments, they have wheat in it. So if we're cutting those things out, we may notice less calories, weight loss, and we're seeing the changes in weight there. But it's not always the healthiest. If we think about wheat, rye, and barley, there's a lot of fiber, there's a lot of iron, there's a lot of B vitamins in those foods. And many of our celiac disease or even patients who are going on a gluten-free diet are often deficient in those nutrients because of that. So it's not something I would recommend unless you truly have a medical necessity to be gluten-free. There is nothing healthier in gluten-free. In fact, a lot of our gluten-free flours, maybe almond flour, peanut flour, sorghum flour, a lot of those have a lot less fiber than your whole wheat flour does anyway. So buying a gluten-free cookie thinking it's healthy, there's going to be a lot more sugar and additives in that than if you just would have had the whole wheat cracker or the whole wheat cookie. So that's just something to think about with our gluten-free. Not always what it's hyped up to be, but if there is a medical necessity, certainly something I would recommend there. Questions on our gluten-free? All right, shout them out at me if you got them. Any questions are fine. Let's dive into more of the meat of what we hear over and over. And I'm going to explain most of these here. We're going to go through Whole30, ketogenic, intermittent fasting. And there may be one other, but if I miss something in these, just let me know too. So Whole30, for those of you who don't know, a lot of this I pulled directly from the Whole30 website, so you can see what they're sharing with consumers and what they're providing. So foods to avoid, they avoid sugar, real and artificial, any alcohol, any grains, so that would be whole grain, rice, pasta, any grains. Legumes, so that would be our black beans, red beans, pinto, navy, lentils. Peanuts and peanut butter are also a legume, so that's something that they classify here as legumes. All of our dairy is avoided, so that's milk, yogurt, cream, sour cream, ice cream, and butter. A lot of the good stuff is avoided here. Foods to include. So basically what we're eating on a Whole30 plan is meats and seafood. Eggs are here, veggies, some fruits, natural fats, and herbs and spices. So it takes a whole gamut of what we could eat and narrows that down a little bit. This is pulled directly from the website, and I just wanted to put this here because as a dietitian, when I'm reading this, and I'll read it out loud for those of you who may not be able to see, it just kind of took me back a little bit based on some of my interactions with patients. So it says you never, ever, ever have to eat anything you don't want to eat. You're all big boys and girls, toughen up. Learn to say no or make your mom proud and say no, thank you. Learn to stick up for yourself. Just because it's your sister's birthday or your best friend's wedding or your company picnic does not mean you have to eat anything. It's always a choice, and we would hope that you stop succumbing to peer pressure in 7th grade. And so I read that, and so some of me goes, gosh, that's pretty harsh. But in my world of eating disorders, gosh, this screams restrict, restrict, overeat, restrict. A lot of eating disorder thoughts. So don't eat this when you're out with friends. Don't be socializing. It's so much restrictive that I see this as a red flag for developing disordered eating patterns. Maybe in your mind, an eating disorder is an anorexic or bulimic, but I see a lot of just disordered eating. And so this, to me, if we're being too restrictive with any type of eating pattern, it can cause eating disorders, and I see it on a daily basis. I'll tell you, a lot of students that come to me are not atypical. I started myself in high school. I was binge eater. A lot of them come to me with, I started a ketogenic or paleo type diet or Whole30, and now I'm so afraid to eat the cookie at this event that I have social anxiety. And so I just wanted to put that out there, not from a point to scare you, but from a point to realize that a lot of these plans can cause disordered eating. Maybe it's in your family members, maybe it's in your own children, maybe it's in someone that you already know, but just being aware of that. With the Whole30, this is really an approach for a 30-day plan. So some questions that a lot of people would ask me is, what's the difference in Whole30 versus Paleo? So Whole30 versus Paleo are pretty similar. We're going to go through Paleo shortly. But our Whole30 is really meant for do this for 30 days and be stringent in exactly what you're doing for 30 days. Now, is that a lifestyle change? Let's talk about that. It is a short-term solution. Many people give up before the 30 days. They go back to regular eating patterns after 30 days. So weight goes up and down. Our metabolism gets confused with that. It's kind of like those cleanses. We lose 5-10 pounds. Our metabolism goes great. I lost weight. And now we're back up again, and it's a constant yo-yo. And for anyone who struggled with weight, you know how frustrating that can be to see that number change. So my recommendations with this plan is to strive to choose less processed foods. I think that's basic, that we could all do better with. But include a variety of foods and cook more at home. And that's a great thing that Whole30 does. It encourages you to cook more at home. When we go out to eat or go get processed foods, a lot of them have grains, dairy, beans, that type of thing in there. Just at the top here, this talks through whole grains can be beneficial for decreasing inflammation. Your dairy in particular can help with inflammation from the probiotic standpoint, those yogurts and cheeses. And then legumes, our beans, are great for gut health and decreasing inflammation. So to me, when I see cutting out certain food groups for 30 days or doing these certain things, really what it does is just it restricts a person's eating plan and pattern. When in the U.S. we have a lot of choices. We could choose many different things, and so when we go out to get them, we feel entitled to choose what we want. And a lot of these plans, when they just narrow it down, we tend to follow that pretty well, but is it a lifestyle change? Are you going to keep doing that the rest of your life? Probably not. And if you answer that question and say probably not, then it's not something that I would recommend for a long-term approach. Okay, questions on Whole30? Yes?
You mentioned probiotics. That's a big thing right now, taking probiotics every day. So would you suggest that, or?
You know, as always, I suggest getting your nutrients from food first. So iron, vitamins, probiotics, that type of thing. If we can get it from yogurts, if we can get it from fermented foods, kombucha, that type of thing, great. But if we find that we're not eating many of those foods, we don't like them, taste being a preference, then your daily probiotic is fine to choose. In fact, a lot of times patients that struggle with irritable bowel syndrome or have stomach issues, if I can get them on a probiotic, an over-the-counter one, usually they do a little bit better too. So certainly food first, but if not, we can go to the supplement form. But great question. Yes?
What about prebiotics?
Prebiotics. So prebiotics fuel the probiotics. There's a lot more research going on with that as far as gut health, because if we have the great probiotics sitting there and they have no food, it's kind of like us, we're not going to survive and do very well. So I think that's a very up-and-coming subject that needs to be studied a little bit more, but I'm certainly on board with getting more of those prebiotic-rich foods in our diet and not just focusing on the probiotics as we once thought.
Could you just talk about more of the, you mentioned the sugar versus the sugar substitute, and I guess how it reacts. I don't know what the reason behind it.
Did you want me to just explain the difference between sugars and like artificial?
Well, for this particular diet, it seems like you could have neither. Really restricting.
Yeah, all sugars. And so when you restrict those carbohydrates, and really what this plan is, if it's no whole grains, if it's no dairy, which has lactose as a carbohydrate, it has very little carbohydrate from the beans, those types of things. That's what we're looking at from an overall lower carb type plan. When this looks at sugar, whether it's real or artificial, I'll kind of give you the rundown on artificial versus real, and maybe that'll help explain this a little bit. So our fruits, lactose and milk, that's from a natural fruit source or a sugar source. And so those are all things that we need on a daily basis, and we digest them properly. There's a lot of good nutrients in that. What I tend to steer away from or recommend that patients steer away from is our added sugars. So that would be anything outside of fruit or dairy, because lactose is a natural sugar, fructose is naturally in our fruits. But trying to limit, not necessarily avoid, but limit things that are refined or have added sugar. Sodas, cakes, cookies, candies, those types of things. But I'm a big proponent of including dairy and fruit in our diet. Just because it has sugar doesn't mean it's an unhealthy type. Sugar is still sugar, though, at the end of the day. And so I think that's where people get confused is, well, I had honey, that's better than table sugar. Well, not really. They're both still sugar at the end of the day. And so it's really in the context of how we eat it. The fruit has the peel, it has the fiber, the milk has the protein, so we're going to balance that a little bit better digestively. But our artificial sweeteners, so that would be stevia, truvia, Splenda, sweet and low, N-equal, any of those, they have no calories in them. They taste sweet. The stevia and truvia are really the only two that they grow on a plant, so they're not man-made. The others are more processed and manufactured. So my perspective on this is if you're diabetic or have some sort of glucose, insulin resistance, that type of thing, it's certainly appropriate to be consuming your artificial sweeteners for a sweetness that you don't want to raise your blood sugar with. But for the average person, I would recommend not having any artificial sweeteners. If you are having the artificial sweetener, I would suggest the stevia or truvia because it's a little bit more in its natural form. But here again, I'm from the perspective of have the real thing, just eat the right portion of it. We tend to say it has Splenda in it, no sugar, okay, now we're doubling the portion because it's healthier in our mind. As opposed to just the regular ice cream, if we ate a half a cup, which is a serving, we would feel more satisfied. And there's a lot of studies around artificial sweeteners and lactose satiation. So we tend to crave more sweets because we have artificial sweeteners. We tend to not feel as satisfied and go for other things due to those artificial sweeteners. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
That was kind of long. Yes, ma'am.
What are sugar alcohols?
Sugar alcohols are kind of like an artificial sweetener. They're in a different classification. On the ingredient list, you're going to see anything that ends in OL, sorbitol, maltitol, xylitol. Those are all sugar alcohols. It is used a lot in like sugar-free candies. A lot of sugar-free products will have them because it gives the sense of sweetness. It has no calories, but I will tell you the digestive issues with sugar alcohols is extreme. So if you ever look at like Halo Top ice cream, it'll say sugars and then under it, it'll say sugar alcohols. They have a lot, and it tastes sweet. It's lower calorie. You don't notice many different effects, but you will see a lot of gastrointestinal issues with that, diarrhea and that type of thing, cramping, bloating with a large amount of sugar alcohols. I don't recommend them for that reason, just because I don't, here again, have the real ice cream, just have the right portion of it. Okay. All right, good questions. We'll keep moving on here. Paleo. So paleo is, like I said, kind of similar to that Whole30. It's just a little bit more of what they would term a lifestyle in quotes. So this is going to eliminate dairy, grains, legumes, sugar, and salt. This is also known as the caveman, the Stone Age diet. You may have seen that. Paleo was really one that started out first, and then we've started to see the Whole30, ketogenic, that type of thing. So what it reduces our highly refined, highly processed foods, so our white breads, white pastas, those types of things. It reduces a lot of our things that I was just talking about, cakes, cookies, candy, many of those types of processed foods. It encourages fruits and vegetables. Yes, I think that's great. But one of the main deficiencies here is it cuts out major food groups. And here again, if it's cutting out major food groups, all dairy, all bread, all grains or fruits, then I would say it's certainly hard to get all of our nutrient needs in. And I don't even see it just from a calorie standpoint. Look at more of the nutrients. So what do whole grains provide? B vitamins, iron, folic acid. The reason they were fortified with these things years ago was to prevent birth defects and to help with people that were vitamin B deficient. So we're cutting them out. Where are we going to get that from? Dairy, legumes, all great things. As we've already mentioned, the dairy, the probiotics, the legumes, the protein, the fiber, those are great things that we need. So a typical meal plan on the paleo diet usually exceeds the recommendation for fat and protein, and it falls short on carbohydrates. So it's a low carb, higher fat and protein type diet. Here I would recommend supplementing with vitamin D and calcium because we are cutting out that dairy. Usually it's a little bit more difficult to get our actual needs of vitamin D and calcium with that. But paleo is seen as we can do this for a longer period of time. But here again, if there's any type of plan out of all of these that we're talking about, I usually do more of a modified paleo version for some of my patients. So I would never cut out carbs completely. I would never encourage them to cut out dairy completely or legumes completely. But I would encourage them to really limit the sweeteners and the sugar that they're consuming. I would encourage them to have a little bit higher protein, higher fat. We feel more satisfied with that. But we also need carbs for brain development, for brain function, and to feel better, just physically, especially if we're into athletics or doing any type of endurance type event. So a modified version of this is one thing I would say, I can get behind that a little bit. It's the more extreme of following this certain plan for only 30 days. It's this next one we'll talk about on the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting that we'll go back and forth with a little bit. Yes?
What is salt?
It's talking more about processed type foods here. So a lot of our processed foods, our frozen dinners, our canned products are going to have salt in them to preserve them. So it's really just focusing on less processed, more cooking at home, trying to use things like herbs, spices, seasonings that don't have as much salt in them. We certainly need salt in our diet, though. The salt, probably about a year or two ago, that was a big thing in the media. Limit salt, cut out salt. But we have to remember that our heart is a sodium-potassium pump, so we need salt in our diet. I would never advocate for cutting it out completely, but in our processed foods, if we just limit it there, it's going to be beneficial. Yes?
Yeah, I'm surprised that why is the kind of the diet they deny the legumes, because I've heard that the protein from the beans, the fasolin, actually is quite good to reduce the weight and give you the fiber also because it stays in your stomach and it's a very good one.
Absolutely, and I never discourage beans as part of a balanced intake and diet, especially for people who are on a budget, college students in particular, different cultural backgrounds. That's their main source of protein. So I never discourage legumes. It's always fascinating to me that they always cut them out of Whole30 and keto and paleo. And I never understand exactly why. There's different people that say it causes different effects, but there is not near enough research to outweigh some of the benefits of our protein, fiber, and nutrients that beans provide. Okay. Intermittent fasting. So this is another one too I'm seeing a lot more of with students, and there's a lot of research, good and bad, on this. And I want to present a little bit of both because as a dietitian, usually I'm not a diet person. I don't recommend them. I don't like to encourage them. But with this one, you still have to go back to the research and the science and see what they're saying. So let me break down what intermittent fasting is first, and then we'll talk about the science. So intermittent fasting, there's different approaches to this, and I'll tell you what I often see most is this time-restricted feeding, but there are other types. Alternate day feeding. This is alternating between feeding and fasting days. So people on this plan would say, well, I feed one day, I fast another. On their fasting day, they would have one meal, which would be 25% of their overall calorie needs. So if they're consuming 2,000 calories in a typical day, then one day, on their fasting day, they would only eat 25% of that, a fourth of those calories, and at one meal. So imagine yourself doing that, eating normally, and then one day you're only eating a fourth of what you would consume. Whole day fasting, this is 5:2 diet. 5 days eat normally, 2 days restricted calorie consumption. So this one's a little bit different, but 5 days we're eating regularly, and then the 2 days restricting. And then this time-restricted feeding is what I see most often in a lot of patients, and what's usually online when you read about it, is 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of feeding. And so when we think about this, though, it's sometimes we're already doing that. You just don't realize it, but I see it a little bit differently from a consumer standpoint is if we start eating at 8 o'clock, and then a lot of my patients that I see, they're staying up till 2 or 3, and they're still eating at that time. When they go on an intermittent fast like this, of stopping to eat and having their cutoff at 8 or 9 o'clock, they tend to do better or feel better, and they lose weight because now they're cutting out all those kinds of eating. But if you look at your own eating patterns, many of you may be already doing something like this. So what are the benefits? So the research is showing here it can be associated with a decrease in body weight. Body fat, waist circumference. Where I see that a lot of the perspective from my students and patients is because they're putting themselves in a window when they can't eat, not giving it free range of, okay, well, I can eat whenever I want, or whenever I'm staying up later one night, but maybe the next night I'm not going to eat at that time. You can still eat the same number of daily calories and don't have to really take away certain foods. That's key in my mind because now we're not saying don't eat carbs, we're not saying don't eat protein, so that's helping a little bit. It's pretty easy to follow. We know we can eat from these times to these times. But one thing that often happens too, this could be a pro and a con, we eat a larger portion in a shorter period of time. So is that good or bad? We could argue either way. Yes, we feel more full because we're eating a larger amount here. Or are we setting ourselves up for failure and eating so much at one time that the next time we eat, we're going to still want that same amount and still want that same amount? So some cons, this can really interfere with the social aspect of eating, and we looked at that a little bit with the Whole30. Okay, well, if someone invites us to eat and we're not in our timing period of when we're eating, are we going to go? And does that impact or hinder our socialization? Getting hangry, many of you know what that may mean. I clearly do. But that's when we're just over the point of, okay, I'm tired of starving myself. And our body gets to that point where we're so hungry that it doesn't matter if we had best intentions to grab the carrot sticks when we got home. I'm going to grab whatever's easy and quick and stopping on the way home or fast. And so that can often impact us. Binge-like tendencies, I see this a lot too. So those people who restrict, do good all day, they're in a good environment at work, and then they go home and it's a free-for-all and binge because no one's watching, and I'm trying to be healthy here. And then I can see a lot of digestion issues with this, bloating, abdominal pain, irritable bowel syndrome, over and over just because of irregularities of eating with this. One thing that I would suggest with this one or offer is if someone is diabetic or has hypoglycemia or has some type of blood sugar mismanagement, this is something I would not recommend at all. Really because of waiting too long in between eating, someone even with polycystic ovarian syndrome, a pregnant person, I would not suggest this just from a standpoint we need that constant energy in. So good and bad with this eating pattern. I think it just adds a little bit of structure. It's not certainly something that I would say, yes, everyone needs to follow this. But if you have a hard time cutting off of when you're eating, knowing if you're truly hungry or not, you just kind of mindlessly snack at 9 o'clock at night, this can help a little bit with that. And the one thing I like is that it doesn't cut out certain types of foods. Questions? Yeah.
In my conversations with people about this, that it seems to eliminate breakfast. And then I've always heard breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Great question. Yes. And, you know, a lot of the patients that I have on this who are trying it do the same thing. And so, yes, breakfast is the most important meal. I would never argue against that. It starts your metabolism for the day. Every patient that comes in, I always recommend eating within an hour of waking up. I don't care what it is, if it's just a handful of cereal, if it's a banana, if it's trail mix, just something helps tremendously. So if we start eating earlier, the plan with this too, it means we have to stop eating earlier. And so that changes a little bit of this. Here again, I'm not a huge advocate for it. I do think it helps some people and establish structure, but I would never compromise breakfast or skipping a meal to fit into this pattern, if that makes sense. Other questions? Okay, let's go to the ketogenic. This is a big hot topic right now in particular. And one thing a lot of times I always ask the patients that I work with, okay, well, tell me why you started following this or what led you to this. And if you're like a lot of consumers, and we all are kind of in that same boat, sometimes we don't even know why we're doing what we're doing. We don't know why we're buying gluten-free. Someone told us to buy it. We don't know what ketogenic even means, but it sounded good, and my friend lost 20 pounds, so I'm going to try it. Let's go over the basics of what this is. A ketogenic diet is high in fat. So 65 to 75% of calories is from fat. The average recommendation right now is 10 to 25% of our calories from fat. Low in carbohydrate, 5 to 10% of calories. The recommendation, the USDA recommendations is 40 to 60%. So extremely low in carbohydrates. Moderate in protein, so 15 to 20% of calories, pretty average for what I recommend for many of my patients. Fruits are usually avoided. All grains, even whole grains, are discouraged because if we only have 5 to 10% of our calories from carbs, we can't eat much grains at all, if any. So that's the basics of it. Mainly fat, a little bit of protein, and then very, very little carbohydrates. So ketogenic, what is this? Ketosis in particular, when we look at this, this is not a new diet. This has been around a long time. On the next slide, I'll talk you through a little bit about where it started. But ketosis in particular is what our body goes into when we don't have carbohydrates, okay? So let's back up. Our body and brain needs glucose. Carbohydrates are broken down to glucose, okay? Any type of carbohydrate, whether it's a fruit, a vegetable, a whole grain, a piece of cake, it's broken down to glucose. So our body and brain needs it. In fact, our brain functions on carbohydrates alone. So if we don't have carbohydrate, it finds other ways to break down something for energy. When we have no carbohydrate or glucose, our body looks for other forms of energy. And so without carbohydrates, insulin is a hormone level that drops. And it says, wait a minute, I have no carbohydrates here. Where else can I get them? And the fat is the next piece that's released from the cells. Fat breaks down. It turns into ketones, which is where we get ketosis and ketogenic, and that's the body's second choice of energy. So think back to many years ago, our food pyramid, the base of the pyramid used to be carbohydrates, right? That's our body's primary source of energy. We need carbohydrates. Then it was fruits, vegetables, protein, and fat. We've completely flipped this here because we think that if we starve our body of carbohydrates and we don't eat them, our body is going to go somewhere else. It goes to the fat. It pulls that. It tells the liver to pull the fat. We use that for energy, and that's where we start to break down fat and lose some weight with that. Okay? But let's take a deeper look at this. Where this all started was a ketogenic diet that was developed with epilepsy. So for those of you who don't know, epilepsy is seizures. And a lot of our young kids in particular who had frequent seizures, They found that if they starved them of carbohydrate, they would have less seizures. And that was because they had less glucose coming in and they did better. Ketones can influence the neurotransmitter, that's the brain function for seizures. So they found some really positive impacts with this. They're also now finding some positive impacts for diabetic patients, so controlling blood sugar and insulin regulation. But most aren't using it for that. They're not using it for epilepsy. Many of us here in this room wouldn't be using it for that. Many of us are using it for weight loss, because if we think about it, it makes sense. Our body goes to the fat to break down for energy. But what are the long-term effects of that? If we don't have epilepsy, if we don't have this brain condition or brain trauma in particular, they're seeing brain trauma patients or even those with brain disorders, with having a ketogenic diet, they're doing a little bit better. But here again, we're not using it for that. We're using it more for weight loss. So one, it eliminates a major food group. Key, our carbohydrates. We need that for our body and our muscles to function. We have limited food options, which means if we have limited food options, and I tell you to only eat protein and fat, we can't eat anything else, so we tend to lose weight because we're not eating everything we used to. Many people don't know, when we look at a lot of these plans, there are a lot of low carb, right? Whole30, Paleo, with our ketogenic here. The reason we lose weight quickly with low carb diets is because water and carbohydrates are stored around each other. When we don't have carbohydrates, we lose water weight. And for anyone here, again, who's tried to lose weight, when we see numbers decrease on the scale, it's rewarding, it's satisfying, we keep doing it, but it's mainly water weight that we're losing in those first few weeks in particular. So no carb intake, loss of water weight. Weight is often regained. This is not a long-term approach to weight loss. Many people on this plan don't last very long. If they do, it's not satisfying. They find that they're now developing other complications or issues. And personally, I see a lot of mental health, depression, anxiety, stress as a factor with low-carb diets. I've seen it in some bipolar patients. I've seen it in those struggling with just depression and anxiety in general, because the carbohydrates give that serotonin. They release a little bit of those endorphins that help us to calm and feel a little better. So carbohydrates would not be something that I would completely eliminate here. Keto flu, many of you may have heard of that or heard other people talking about this. So what is that? This is brain fog, fatigue, nausea, poor endurance. Well, if you think about carbohydrates, none coming in, our brain functions on carbohydrates alone. The brain is kind of foggy. We're not real clearly thinking. Poor endurance, for those of you who do any type of athletic events or sports or just recreational walking, jogging, swimming, we need carbohydrates for that. So our performance suffers with that. Constipation is another one I see here often. The low carb, less fruits, less whole grains, less vegetables, all things that help with digestive health. And then mineral deficiencies, so sodium, potassium, chloride, vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, selenium, zinc, all of these things that when you talk with your friends, colleagues, when I talk with patients, we tend to just focus on calories and weight loss. But I would challenge you to think about the side effects, not just calories, not just weight loss, but vitamins, minerals. Get a little deeper in what we're missing out on, not just the superficial surface, because I can't tell you how many students come in and they've lost weight, but now are deficient in a ton of nutrients because of how they've lost the weight or what they're actually eating. So dive a little bit deeper to that and try to think outside of just that superficial layer. Okay, questions on the ketogenic? Yes.
Is that different from the ketones? Because
it's the same
they've
pattern.
got the little pouches and supposedly sharper and
you'll see like the ketone sticks where you pee on a stick and you're measuring your
I haven't seen
ketones.
that.
And, that's a whole nother, it's just a lot of these diet fads who are money-making businesses. Look at some of the products on the market now because of our gluten-free support. Look at the products on the market because of our Atkins lower carb support. So with this, any type of ketones or ketogenic, it's going to be the same type patterns. Higher fat, medium protein, low carbohydrate. Yes, ma'am.
It seems to me like this would be very detrimental for cholesterol and stuff like that. I'm surprised I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's an excellent topic too. What we used to say was cholesterol in food, whether it was from high-fat animal products, that's fried chicken, that's the fat around steak, high-fat milk, full-fat milks. We used to think that anytime we ate cholesterol, it raised our blood lipid cholesterol. The past 2 to 3 years, we're seeing that that's not the case. It's not so much as dietary cholesterol raises our blood lipid cholesterol. It's lifestyle, so lack of activity, eating patterns in general, so just eating fast food, processed foods, unhealthy foods, and genetics is a big factor. And I'll tell you, at first I thought, well, gosh, surely that can't be. We've got to tell them to go on a lower fat diet. But I have a lot of patients who are vegetarian, vegan, they eat no animal products and have high cholesterol. It's either lifestyle, they're not very active, they're just not eating good in general, or two, a lot of times you ask them if mom or dad has high cholesterol. So certainly too much fat, though, is not a good thing. Too much of anything is not a good thing. And I tried to explain this to a patient the other day when we were talking about carbohydrates, and it's usually easy for us to say good carbs and bad carbs. Cakes, cookies, candy, we don't want that. Whole grains, fruits, vegetables, yeah, those are good. But proteins and fat are the same way. We can have a lean chicken breast, a lean piece of hamburger meat, or we can have a ribeye steak, or we can have a fried piece of pork chop. That's different there too. Same with fat. So we have our healthy fats, olive oils, nuts, seeds, avocado, and then we have our fats that we want to try to avoid. And so I think if we can break that down in all three categories and not just focus on the carbohydrates, it helps us to see that bigger picture. Other questions? Okay, let's go through some take-home messages, and then we'll have about 5-10 minutes for last questions. So my emphasis here is on a lifestyle change. Do something you can do the rest of your life, even if it's small. And I really mean that. If it's less diet soda, if it's less regular soda, if it's going to walk 30 minutes every other day, make a lifestyle change in something that you can stick to. I like to include all food groups, our whole grains, our fruits, our vegetables, our lean meats. Anything lean would fit in there, including beef, and our dairy. Dairy is one thing we could talk about for a while too, because we have the full fat and low fat, and we're seeing a lot of controversy on that right now. For any of you who keep up with the news, now we're looking at what can we label as milk. So almond milk, cashew milk, we see that in the stores, but now there's a lot of pushback on that's not really milk, so we need to take that off the label. So dairy is kind of in this uproar of what's best to do. The recommendation is still low-fat dairy, but I see a lot of big benefits between full-fat dairy and brain development. We do it in kids under 2, so why are we not doing it? I see it a lot in satisfaction, so satiation, hunger cues, we feel more satisfied with that full-fat yogurt versus the low-fat. So we're seeing cheeses, same thing. So I think we're going to see some changes there. The recommendation from the USDA is still low-fat dairy products, but I can see a benefit swinging the other way, and I think there'll be more to come in the research there. Not a quick fix. 80-20 rule is what I share with a lot of my patients, is eat well 80% of the time. So try to choose the whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, and dairy. 20% enjoy life. Go out with friends. Do eat what you normally wouldn't eat, but don't do that 80% of the time. You're not going to see the changes that you want there. Mindfulness, this is 50% of the battle too, knowing how much we're eating, when we're eating. Are we mindlessly snacking? Are we snacking when we're stressed, bored, anxious? Do we even know why we're choosing what we're choosing? That's where I would always start if you're trying to look at making a change. Certainly exercise. We can't just eat healthy and hope that we're going to stay fit or that we're going to stay healthy. Exercise, just moving more. And that can mean taking the stairs instead of the elevator. That can mean just walking around the building before you go into work. So simple things here. And that kind of encompasses more of the healthy eating pattern than trying to focus on just the quick fix there. Do you have a question here?
I was going to ask if almond milk was good or bad.
Yeah, so almond milk, when we look at that, comparison, I'll compare it just to cow's milk, okay? So vitamin D, calcium, they're pretty similar in both. if the almond milk is fortified with those. You just have to look at the package. But for the most part, they're going to have both. Protein content is the big difference. So our cow's milk has 8 or 9 grams of protein per cup. Our almond milk has 0 to 1 gram of protein per cup. So here again, when we look at the package and it says almond milk, low calorie, 60 calories, we think low calorie, weight loss, I'm going to choose it. But if I look at it, I'm thinking low calorie. Why is it low calorie? Well, there's no protein grams in it. Protein has calories. And so when we compare those two, the cow's milk in my mind wins every time. If we don't like cow's milk, if we're allergic to it, if we don't want to choose it, your soy milk is very comparable to cow's milk in a protein content. So both have about 8 or 9 grams, and that would be my choice of replacement for cow's milk. Does that answer your question? Okay. Other questions? Yes.
So what are your thoughts that soy milk raises estrogen levels in young girls? Is that a real thing, or is that just something that we
You know, that's an excellent question too. So when we look at the structure of soy, just the chemical structure of it, or the physical structure, it looks very similar to estrogen when we look at just the organic chemistry of it. And so what I tend to recommend, or what the research is supporting right now, it's very back and forth. It's estrogen or soy milk causes breast cancer, soy milk prevents breast cancer. But we have to remember in females that are menstruating, so usually our younger females, they're already producing quite a bit of estrogen. So we throw soy into the mix, and a lot of times they compete a little bit. And to me, if I have a young female, I would not recommend the soy as much for that reason. But if we look at the flip side, for our females post-menopausal, there's no estrogen going on. When we have soy on board, it mimics that a little bit, and we see a preventative risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, those types of things with our post-menopausal women because there's no estrogen to compete with that soy. But there's a lot of back and forth research on that. So that's usually my stance right now is if someone doesn't have to have soy as a young female, I wouldn't say go crazy with it. If it's their only replacement, if that's what they're choosing, it's okay to do, but there's a lot of controversy around that. Good question, though. Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about the plant paradox, Dr. Gundry?
As far as just consuming more plant-based foods?
Well, the not consuming the lectin-based foods.
Yeah, you know, I had met with a dietitian friend last week, and she was bringing that up too, because it avoids legumes and it avoids some of those things. You know, here again, I don't recommend things that are going to cut out all those certain beneficial food groups, dairy, legumes, whole grains, that type of thing. I certainly think including more plants in our diet, so fruits, vegetables, is something we could all benefit from. I don't think we do enough of that. But when we look at that, the lectin and the nutrients, there's not a lot of research specifically around that just yet. With a lot of these fads too, it's a money-making business. So how can I put my name on a book and sell 1,000 copies and make a little bit in return? So unless it's truly science-based, which is not just yet, I don't recommend it for that reason. I think there's always, like with any of these, there are certain tips we can take from each one. Okay, less processed foods, yeah, that makes sense. Less of our refined sugars, yes. More plant-based foods, yes. But cutting out certain foods for certain reasons, to me, doesn't really add up. Yes.
Are there items that you would absolutely recommend that we purchase organic?
Good question. So organic really just means the growing conditions of how it was raised or how it was grown. So our fruits and vegetables, it was grown in an organic environment, meaning less herbicides, pesticides, that type of thing. I will tell you, though, that a lot of our organic farmers do have organic pesticides now. They'll be the first to tell you that they're regulated. They are tightly regulated. Don't get me wrong. Organic farming is expensive, and it's tightly regulated by the USDA to be certified organic, but there are organic pesticides. Pesticides in general are very expensive, and these farmers don't make a whole lot. So they're not just throwing them on everything and anything because they can. They're doing it as just crop management practices to prevent bugs from biting the peach or whatever that might be. So Organic is one of those things that's kind of a take it or leave it, feel good effect. Same with our animals, it's fed organic feed, but it takes a lot more time to grow that animal because they can't do some of the same things that they would do in a conventionally grown product. Organically though, if I were to choose anything, it would be our very porous fruits and vegetables. So that would be like strawberries, berries, that type of thing. But nutritionally, there is no difference. So there's no difference in vitamins in that organic berry versus the conventionally grown berry. So I would never discourage someone who doesn't, they feel guilty about buying strawberries that are conventionally grown because of the pesticide risk. If you wash them and do your best to wash as best as you can, you're going to be okay. But I think a lot of it's more of a marketing thing than anything, as opposed to truly seeing a benefit in our health nutritionally. Yes.
And two things. One, people who choose vegetarian, vegan diets for whatever reason, they're eliminating meat. So how would you recommend they get what they may be missing? And then the other one, could you comment on the GMO?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So vegetarian, vegan. A lot of patients are in that realm that I visit with too. When we look at that, our vegetarian, vegan, I always recommend protein sources. That's one thing. Some people will even choose vegetarian, vegan to lose weight. And what they find is that if you think about vegetarian, vegan, there's very little protein, so they're consuming a lot of carbs, and they tend to gain weight on it because they don't know how to get protein in. So protein sources here would be quinoa. It's a great complete protein, and I always try to emphasize complete proteins because that means it has all of our essential amino acids. Beans and rice we eat together because that makes a complete protein, but on its own, beans are not a complete protein. So when we eat those together, it makes all of our essential amino acids. Eggs, beans, nuts, seeds, all great sources of protein to be added. Vegan is a little bit more challenging because they're not maybe choosing eggs or dairy, and they're a little bit limited there. So I usually give them a whole handout of protein sources being our tofu or soy-based products, beans, nuts, seeds, but then also thinking about the other vitamins and minerals, B12. If we're not having any meat, that's mainly in our, B12 is mainly in our meat products, so nutritional yeast is a great thing they can sprinkle on different dishes, oatmeal, that type of thing. So really encouraging a balance of protein, and thinking about at breakfast, do I have a source of protein and carbohydrate, not is it just oatmeal? Do I have almonds in there? Do I have a scoop of peanut butter in there? Do I have something in there? And that helps space that out a little bit. That answer your question there? Okay. And GMOs, so that's another big one that we see a lot too. So what GMOs are just genetically modified organisms. And so they've been around forever. We just see more of it now in the media. And, maybe I take a different stance on this, but I think about more of our farming practices and the manufacturers and businesses who raise the food that we have. And I think education is key for a lot of consumers to realize where that comes from. GMOs, and I do a lot of nutrition events with dairy farmers, cattle farmers, and a lot of farmers in general, and I kind of ask some of these same questions of, the organic question and when to do that, and also these GMOs. And really, when I asked that question, they said, look, it's just using technology in our workplace. It's same as you and I using iPads and iPhones and computers. It's managing my crop better to say, you know what, I'm going to produce a disease-resistant plant that's going to grow better and grow longer so we can feed more Americans because we're all growing here too. And that's the way I look at it a little bit of how can we feed more with less resources but still do it in an appropriate way. And it just helps with things. And I think about like seedless watermelons. Personally, I'd rather a seedless watermelon than picking the seeds out. That's a genetically modified organism. It's ways to make things a little bit better, but it's just crossbreeding and it's pollination and it's some of these same things we were doing years ago. It's just termed a little bit different, and it's ways that farmers have a little bit more of a hand in what they're growing and how they can get it farm to table a little bit quicker. Yes, ma'am.
What's your thoughts on multivitamins? Do you recommend them?
Yeah, often I do. Just a general multivitamin, I kind of term it an insurance policy for most people. We can't eat 10 oranges a day, and we usually don't. And we may not meet all of our vitamins and minerals requirements that we need on a daily basis. So a general multivitamin would not be a bad thing to recommend. I tend to do it, encourage students to do that on a regular basis. But going crazy with other vitamins, it's not something I suggest unless there's a true deficiency or a true need, or maybe there's a family disease risk or heart disease risk, and fish oil may be beneficial there, but just overall, your general multivitamin would be appropriate. Okay. And we'll go, I think, we're a little over, but one more question? You good? Okay.
So I have a question about a good way to rehydrate or balance your electrolytes with hot weather.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend that's not like a high sugar drink?
No, excellent question, especially the past few days. It's been scorching outside. So my recommendation with this is, if you're exercising more than an hour in intensive heat, you certainly need to rehydrate with vitamin and electrolyte type fluid. If it's less than an hour, if you're not sweating profusely, it's just kind of some casual exercise. There's no need to grab the Gatorade. It's really more seen as a sugary beverage there. So with that, I recommend, your Gatorade would be a pretty basic one. We're diluting your Gatorade if you're concerned about the actual sugar content in that. Your G2 or your low sugar products are just going to have an artificial sweetener in it, so it's kind of, is that the best? I'm not real certain about that. I wouldn't recommend it per se unless it's absolutely necessary. But really, at the end of the day, rehydration after exercise, chocolate milk is one of the best refueling drinks because it has carb and protein, and it has the fluid, and it has the potassium and calcium and vitamins that we need. Or trying to choose more of your fruits and vegetables too. That's going to have tons of sodium, potassium and vitamins and minerals that we need for that. So you could infuse water, you could squeeze different, kind of doing a lemon type juice or with water would be a great alternative, but making sure you're eating within an hour of exercise is really key as well to get that sodium in if you're not getting it from your actual fruit or vegetable. Okay. Well, good. Well, thanks for your time. I'm happy to answer any other questions if you happen that you didn't want to ask in front of the group. And then I'll be back in the fall too, as Christina mentioned, for the fall period.
That was awesome. Okay, if y'all don't forget to say the date for the fall events that we'll have for nutrition. Don't forget to sign in. And if you have any questions or concerns, please see the wellness team. Thank you.